My son thought it would be funny to leave me stranded in another state. He laughed when he said it. His wife laughed too. And a few hours later, the police would be knocking on their hotel door while I stood somewhere they never expected me to be. That came later. At the beginning, it was just a car ride. The story you are about to hear is a fictional work created by the writing team of the channel Her Secrets. It is inspired by real-life situations to convey lessons about family, emotions, and human values. All characters and events are illustrative in nature. My name is Meredith Caldwell. I am 67 years old. I have learned to be careful with my energy, my health, and my pride. I live alone. I drive myself. I keep my appointments. And I do not ask for help unless I truly need it. That matters to me. It always has. So when my son offered to drive me with him and his wife for what he described as a short, simple trip, I hesitated. Not because I was afraid of the distance, but because of the tone. He said it the way people do when they want something to sound smaller than it is. "It's just a few hours," he said. "We'll be back before you know it." His wife smiled and added, "It might be nice. We don't do things together much anymore." That part was true. We didn't. I felt the familiar pressure to agree. The quiet suggestion that saying no would make things awkward. I told myself I was being oversensitive. I told myself I didn't want to start another unnecessary tension over something so ordinary, so I got into the back seat with my purse on my lap and my coat folded beside me, because the front was already crowded with their bags and cups. As we pulled away, my son adjusted the radio and started talking about traffic and timing. Everything sounded normal, almost gentle. I ignored the small, persistent feeling that I had just stepped into a space where my comfort would come second again. At first, the conversation stayed light. My son talked about traffic, about how people your age still overestimate travel time. He said it casually, like he wasn't aiming it at me. But then he glanced in the rearview mirror and smiled. "You always get anxious on the road," he said. "You've been dramatic about trips since forever." I opened my mouth to respond, then closed it again. I didn't feel dramatic. I felt quiet. His wife laughed softly. "He doesn't mean it like that," she said. "You just grew up in a different time. Things felt bigger back then. Back then. As if caution were a phase people age out of." "I'm fine," I said. "I just like to know what's going on." My son chuckled. "See, that's what I mean. Always needing control." That word landed heavier than the others. His wife turned in her seat slightly, but not toward me. She spoke to him, not to me. She worries because she's not used to letting go. She said, "It's kind of old-fashioned, but it's sweet in its own way." Sweet, like a habit you tolerate, not a person you respect. I sat there listening to them talk about me as if I weren't in the car. Not cruelly, not loudly, just comfortably, like they'd agreed on this version of me long ago. When I did speak, my son answered quickly, gently, the way people do when they think they're being patient. "Relax," he said. "We've got it handled." I watched his hands on the steering wheel. Steady, confident, certain. Something shifted then. Not anger. Something colder. I realized they weren't joking to include me. They were joking to define me. And I was supposed to accept the shape they gave me because it was easier than correcting them. I stayed quiet after that, not because I agreed, but because I was starting to understand how easily my voice disappeared when they decided it didn't matter. We had been quiet for several minutes when my son spoke again, his voice calm, in a way that felt practiced. "You rely on people too much," he said. "You always have." I shifted in my seat. I live alone. I drive myself. I manage my own life. "That's not what I mean," he replied. "You still expect someone to catch you, emotionally, practically. You do that thing where you wait for what I asked. For reassurance," he said. "For someone to tell you it's okay." His wife nodded. "He's right." she added. You lean on him more than you realize. It puts pressure on a marriage. Pressure. That was new. I don't ask him for anything. I said, if I need help, I arrange it myself. My son smiled. Patient again. You always say you're strong. He told me, but strength means standing on your own when it matters. I felt something tighten in my chest. I didn't ask to be evaluated. No one's evaluating you, his wife said quickly. We're just saying maybe this is a chance for growth. Growth. Like I was something unfinished. My son kept his eyes on the road. I'm not trying to be harsh, he said. I'm trying to help you see what you don't want to admit. And what's that, I asked? That you panic when you're not in control, he said. That you need to learn how to handle things without us smoothing it over. I let out a slow breath. You're talking about me like I'm a problem to fix. No, he said, like someone who needs a lesson. The word landed between us and stayed there. His wife reached over and touched his arm. He cares, she said. He just wants you to be more independent. It's not an attack, but it felt like one. Quiet, polite, decided. I looked at the back of his head, the familiar shape of my child grown into someone who believed authority came from confidence alone. In that moment, I understood something clearly. They didn't think they were being cruel. They thought they were right. And because of that, they believed I needed correction, not consideration. I went quiet again, not in surrender, but in recognition. Whatever they thought they were teaching me, they had already decided I was the one who needed to learn. The conversation thinned as the light faded. My son turned the radio down, then back up again, as if he were deciding how much attention to give the road. When I glanced at the dashboard clock, he noticed. We're making good time, he said. You can relax. I wasn't worried. I replied. He smiled without looking at me. You always say that right before you are. His wife leaned back in her seat. We're almost there, she said. It's basically the same place once you cross over. Cross over! The words sat strangely in my head. A few minutes later, my son pointed ahead. We're across the state line now, he said. Casual, almost pleased. See? No big deal. I hadn't realized how much I'd been counting on familiarity until it was gone. The signs looked different. The exits stretched farther apart. My phone buzzed once, then went quiet. My son slowed and signaled. Bathroom break, he said. We'll stop here. The gas station appeared alone, lights sharp against the dark. He pulled in and parked without asking if I needed anything. You take forever, he said, already unbuckling. Grab what you need. We'll wait. His tone was lighter than before. Loose. Like nothing here required care. I opened the door and stepped out. The air cooler than I expected. I turned back toward the car. My son was watching me now, one hand resting on the steering wheel. His wife was smiling at something he'd said under his breath. Don't wander, he added. We don't want to lose you. They laughed together. Not loudly. Comfortably. I hesitated for half a second, then closed the door and started toward the entrance. Behind me, I heard the engine idle. Steady and patient. It felt like a pause arranged on purpose. Not a stop, but a setup. I was halfway to the restroom when I heard my son laugh behind me, not the polite laugh he used in public. The easy one. The one he used when he felt certain. You know what he said. Let's see if she can come back. I turned slowly. What did you say? He leaned forward in his seat, elbow on the wheel. You're always talking about being independent, he said. This feels like a good moment to prove it. His wife covered her mouth, smiling. Oh my God, she said. You're terrible, but you agree, he replied. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. I laughed once, short and unsure. That's not funny. Relax, he said. We're not abandoning you. We're just stepping back. I took a step toward the car. Get out of the way. He started the engine. The sound cut through me faster than any shout. The car rolled forward an inch, then stopped. For a moment, I believed this was the part where he would grin and say he was kidding. I waited for the door to open. I waited for my name. Instead, the car moved again. Slow, deliberate. Stop. I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have time. His wife turned in her seat and looked at me through the rear window. She was laughing now. Not loudly. Like this was something she would tell later. The car picked up speed. I stood there watching the distance grow, the red lights shrinking until they disappeared at the end of the lot. They laughed and drove away. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise had been. My hands shook, then went still. I checked my phone. 1 bar, no missed calls. For several seconds, I didn't move. I told myself this was still a joke, that they'd loop back, that this was some twisted way of proving a point. Minutes passed. The engine noise didn't return. That was when the truth settled in. Not loudly, not all at once. Just enough to understand that my own child had decided my safety was optional, and whatever lesson he thought he was teaching, it had already gone somewhere he couldn't call back. I stood there longer than I should have, as if staying still might bring them back. When that didn't happen, I looked down at my phone. 1 bar of battery. No charger, no messages, nothing waiting for me except the quiet. I told myself to breathe. I told myself I was fine. I was 67 years old, standing alone in a place where no one knew my name, my medical history, or the fact that my knees stiffened when I stood too long. The cold crept in slowly, settling where confidence usually lived. They didn't mean it, I whispered, saying it out loud to see if it sounded true. They'll come back. But the words felt thin. I imagined my son explaining it later, smiling, calling it a misunderstanding. I imagined myself laughing along so things could go back to normal. The thought made my chest tighten. I took a few steps toward the building, then stopped. My hands were shaking now, not dramatically, just enough to notice. A truck pulled out of the lot. Another car passed without slowing. Life moved on around me without acknowledging that I was suddenly unanchored. I checked my phone again, as if the battery might rise on its own. Still 1 bar. That was when I understood something clearly. Waiting for them was not a plan, and whatever came next would have to start with me deciding I wasn't going to disappear quietly just because they thought I would. The woman behind the counter looked up when I walked inside. She didn't rush me. She didn't smile politely and turn away. She watched my hands instead, the way they shook when I set my phone down. "You all right?" she asked. I was dropped off, I said. The word sounded smaller than what had happened. My son and his wife drove away. She waited. That alone felt different. They said it was a joke. I added, "A lesson." Her mouth tightened. "Where are they now? I don't know," I said. "Another town. Another state." She set her pen down. "That's not a joke." I felt myself rush to explain. "I'm an adult. They probably thought I'd figure something out. They always say I'm stronger than I think." She shook her head once. "Strength doesn't make this okay." I looked at the floor. "I don't want trouble." "This isn't about trouble," she said. "It's about safety." The word landed hard. She came around the counter and stood a few feet away, close enough to be solid, but not invasive. "Leaving someone here on purpose," she said, "with no ride. Low battery. Late at night. That's endangerment." I opened my mouth to argue, then stopped. Hearing it said that way stripped the excuses bare. The story I'd been rehearsing collapsed under its own weight. "I kept thinking I'd done something wrong," I said quietly. Her voice softened. "You didn't." I swallowed. "I don't want to make this worse." She met my eyes. "It's already worse. Making it visible is the only thing that changes it." She nodded toward my phone. "If you want, you can call someone, or I can." I looked down at the screen, at the name I'd almost tapped again and again. Then I looked back up at a stranger who had no reason to protect my family's image. "Please," I said, "call for me." When she picked up the phone, the story stopped belonging only to us. And for the first time that night, that felt like relief. The phone felt heavier than it should have in my hand. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, then tapped it awake again. My son's name sat there. Familiar, waiting. I knew exactly what would happen if I pressed it. I would apologize first. I always did. I would soften my voice, explain that I'd misunderstood, that I didn't want to make a scene. I would offer him a way back without asking him to take responsibility. I could already hear myself saying it. I'm fine now. Let's just forget this. The thought made my stomach turn. Behind the counter, the woman waited without hovering. She trusted me to decide. That trust felt steadier than anything I'd been offered all evening. I thought about my age, 67, about my knees that locked when I stood too long, about the one bar of battery blinking like a warning, about the way my son's voice had sounded when he laughed. Certain, unafraid. I lowered the phone. If I call him, I said, he'll explain it away. She nodded. And you'll be alone with it again. I pressed my lips together. Shame crept up, familiar and sharp. The idea of police felt extreme. Public. Final. Families handled things quietly. I'd taught myself that lesson years ago, but survival spoke louder than habit. Who do I call? I asked. Local police. She said, I can help you explain. I dialed myself. The line rang once, twice. When someone answered, my voice wavered only at the start. My name is Meredith Caldwell, I said. I've been left at a gas station in another state. It was intentional. There was a pause. Then the tone shifted. Are you safe right now? The voice asked. I am, I said, but I don't have a ride, and my phone is dying. More questions followed. Clear ones, practical ones. Each answer pulled the story further out of my chest and into a place where it could be handled. When I hung up, my hands were steady again. I didn't feel victorious. I felt exposed, but I also felt something I hadn't expected. The quiet certainty that I had stopped protecting the people who had decided I was expendable. I wasn't there when the officers arrived. I learned what happened in pieces. First from the voice on the phone, later from the quiet weight of the words themselves. They're with us now, the officer said. We've located your son and his wife. I closed my eyes. Did you speak to them? Yes, he replied. At their residence. There was a pause, the kind that carries meaning. They said it was a misunderstanding. He continued. That you stepped out and they assumed you had other plans. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. They left on purpose. We addressed that, he said. We referenced the location, the time, and the fact that you were left without transportation in another state. Another pause. This one heavier. They didn't deny driving away, he added. They said they thought you'd figure it out. Figure it out. The phrase sounded smaller now, stripped of humor. And his wife, I asked. She didn't say much. He said. She stopped smiling when we explained the situation. I pictured it then. The door opening. The uniforms. The familiar confidence draining from their faces as the story was repeated back to them, without laughter, without permission to soften it. They were informed that leaving someone intentionally, especially at your age and under those conditions, could be considered endangerment, the officer said. At the very least, it's on record now. On record. The words felt final in a way apologies never had. What happens next? I asked. For tonight. They've been advised not to contact you directly, he said. Any communication should go through appropriate channels. We'll follow up. When the call ended, the room felt still. Not empty. Settled. I imagined my son standing there, trying to explain himself, realizing that jokes collapse when they have to survive daylight. I imagined my daughter-in-law silent beside him, no longer laughing, no longer framing it as concern. Hours earlier, they had driven away smiling. Now, Strangers had repeated their words back to them slowly. Clearly, without the cushion of family loyalty, I sat with that knowledge and felt something loosen inside me. Not relief, not satisfaction, just the quiet certainty that what they'd done could no longer hide behind a laugh. I got home the next afternoon with a quiet ride arranged by the department, since we were just across the state line. The officer walked me to the door and said, "If they contact you, you don't have to respond." I thanked him and closed the door behind me. My phone buzzed once. A message from my son. "We need to talk." I didn't answer. Later that evening, my sister called. She didn't ask what I planned to do. She said, "You're safe. That's what matters." I told her I wouldn't be riding with them anymore. No shared trips, no last-minute favors. Any contact would be limited and on my terms. She said, "That sounds clear." It felt clear. I didn't rehearse a speech. I didn't write a letter. I let the boundary stand without decoration. Silence did the work that explanations never had. I made tea and sat at the table where I've balanced checkbooks and paid bills and decided things that mattered. I thought about how easily love turns into permission when you keep proving you'll endure anything. The lesson I took wasn't about punishment. It was about safety, about dignity, about the difference between being included and being tolerated. If this story resonates, take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more stories about choosing self-respect without spectacle. I didn't lose my son at that gas station. I lost my need to be tolerated instead of respected.